Hey there, today we are going to talk about how to convert hand-painted spinning fiber into a gradient yarn. Welcome to the SweetGeorgia channel. My name is Felicia from SweetGeorgia and the School of SweetGeorgia. And today I want to talk about how to convert this hand-painted fiber into a gradient yarn. So a gradient hand-spun yarn, meaning that I want colors at one end of the yarn to transition into the next color, into the next color, into the next color. So that way when I go and knit it or crochet it or weave with it, that yarn will fade from one color to the next to the next. It's a really, really beautiful way of working with your yarn, and it's something that's really special and unique. So I'm really excited to share with you how I'm going to go about doing this. There's a number of different ways of spinning gradient yarn, and so we're going to talk about some of the considerations that you might want to make if you're making your own gradient yarn. So here in my hands, I have some spinning fiber. This is our BFL and silk spinning fiber. It happens to be dyed in a colorway called Trail Runner. And so here, if you kind of open it up a bit, you can see we have some purples, we have some purples to blues. It's kind of a short section, a little bit of olive green. There's some light sagey kind of olive green, goes back to olive, goes back to blue, and then goes back to purple. So you can see if I fold the fiber back on itself, you can see kind of how it was dyed. We have these different color sections. Now, not all dyed fiber will do this depending on how it was dyed by that dyer, but this is how we've been painting our hand-painted fibers. So you can see that very easily we could break this up and sort of even rearrange the colors however we want to do it. But I want to basically take all of these purple chunks and put them together, all the blue chunks, put them together, all the green and all the sage chunks. And I want to create a yarn that at the end of the day goes from purple all the way through blue, through olive, and then to this light sage color. I have some grand intentions for this fiber. I actually want to make it into the yoke of a sweater. So I want the sweater to start with purple and then go through blue, go through olive, and then go to sage. And then I want the background of the sweater to be maybe like a light color, maybe a beigey color, neutral, maybe a undyed color maybe, and have that color fade into it. This is all in my mind. This is kind of a big, grand, epic plan that I have for this fiber. In order to get started, the first step that we need to do is we need to break up the fiber into the different color chunks, okay? So you can see here, I would basically look at my fiber and I fluff it up a little bit. I want to loosen it all up a little bit. And then between this olive green and this blue, I'm going to pull them apart. Okay, so you can see I've broken this into the two chunks, but you can see that there is two different colors on each one of these chunks. And that is because when you look at the spinning fiber, it's made up of tiny little individual staples of fiber. I've pulled out a few fibers here, and this is one staple length of our BFL and silk fiber. So you can see it's about maybe 5 or 6 inches long. And so half of that staple has been dyed blue and half of that staple has been dyed olive. And there's no way that you can separate this in order to make two completely distinct and different colors. And in fact, if we want there to be a smooth transition between the colors, we don't necessarily need this to be just one color or another color. It can be the two colors dyed together. But you can see that in any case, there's always going to be some staples or some bits of fiber that have multiple colors dyed on them. Now, knowing that your staple length is about 5 inches in this sort of fiber here, I'm going to pull to the next section here. So here is my blue section. You can see some of it's tinged with olive, some of it's tinged with purple. So I can probably even divide this in half. But there's always going to be some sections with purple and blue and some sections with blue and green. It's very little. I'll probably be able to get very little fiber that is just purely blue on its own. These all look like they're going to be tinged with a little bit of olive. And that's just because the fiber itself, this color section of blue that we dyed, is actually very, very small. No matter how we sort of break up this fiber, it's always going to be tinged with a little bit of purple or a little bit of olive. It's never going to be purely navy blue. And so that's just the nature. If we wanted there to be pure navy blue in this particular colorway, then we would have dyed this section wider. And then if your color section is wider than your staple length, then you'll be able to get some pure color coming out of that. But in any case, this is always going to have a little bit of color to it, and it's going to blend in smoothly and nicely with the other colors that we're going to be working with. And I'm just going through and I'm breaking up this fiber into all the different colors. So you can see I have done that with a previous braid here. So I had a second braid of this trail runner fiber, and I've already sort of broken it up into the different color sections. So here is a pile of all of the sagey kind of greens. Here's a pile of all of the olive and blue kind of colors. I have a pile here of blue, purple, and olive. I might break this up in half and then separate them out a little bit more, get a little bit more differentiation between these colors. And then finally, I have a section here that's all purples and a little bit of blues. So that is the first step, is really just separating out all of your colors into the different distinct color groups. The second step is to really think about what kind of yarn you want to spin at the end of the day. Do you want to spin a 2-ply yarn? Do you want to spin a 3-ply yarn? Do you want to spin a 3-ply chain-plied yarn? Does it need to be worsted spun? Does it need to be woolen spun? All of those decisions are going to affect what you choose to do with this fiber and how you're going to prepare the rest of it. So if you're thinking about maybe you want to spin something that's going to be woolly and it's going to be a hat and it needs to be insulating and all of these kinds of things, it needs to be light and airy and poofy, then you're going to maybe want to do a woolen spun technique, like a long draw. And in that case, maybe you want to spin from rolags. You can definitely blend all this fiber and make yourself some rolags and then spin woolen. Or if you wanted to, you could also sort of comb this fiber together, blend it a little bit in combs, and then pull it through a diz. And then you can spin worsted style and you get something a little bit more sleek and a little bit more fine, more smooth, all of that kind of thing, if you want a more dense, shiny, sort of slick kind of yarn. Now in my case, for this particular epic project that I'm thinking about with sort of a yoke that fades and gradient and all this kind of stuff, the sweater pattern is using worsted weight yarn. It's using a fuzzy worsted weight yarn, so it's meant to be an airy, poofy, light worsted weight. I have seen people use a DK weight, a more dense DK weight yarn, and then knit it at a larger gauge to get that worsted weight. So thinking about the sweater that I want to knit, I think what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using a DK weight yarn for the body of the sweater. And in order to sort of match that DK yarn that I'm going to be using, I need to spin something that is a 3-ply yarn. It's not necessarily woolen spun. It's probably sort of like, but it's not super slick either. So kind of like a semi-worsted, semi-woolen kind of yarn. And then I want it to be 3-ply. So I need to spin approximately 500 yards of this DK weight yarn. So what I might do is spin about 150 grams to 200 grams of this fiber. So that's more than one braid. It's about 1.5, maybe 2 braids of this fiber. So basically, if I want to spin 150 grams of yarn and I want it to be a 3-ply yarn, then I would make one pile of fiber that's all going to total 50 grams. The next one would also total 50 grams, and a third pile that would all be 50 grams. And then across each of these piles, I would want to have approximately the same amount of purple and approximately the same amount of blue in each pile, the same amount of olive in each pile, and the same amount of sage in each pile. And so then when I spin that pile from top to bottom to make one bobbin, and then the second pile from top to bottom to make a second bobbin, and then the third, and then I can ply all 3 of those together. And hopefully, if my quantities of purple and blue and olive and sage are approximately the same in all of those piles, then when I ply them together, the purples should line up with the purples, and the blue should line up with the blue, olive should line up with olive, and then the sage should line up with the sage. That is the ultimate goal. Now, it could be very tricky to get exactly sort of the same amounts of color in each one of those sections. And so in the sections where maybe those colors do not align properly, then when you're spinning those together, you will get a little bit of a barber pole effect for that section. That may be okay with you, that might bother you. Maybe it adds a little bit to the mixing and blending as you go and you knit it. If you're very concerned about the effect that the barber pole might have on your project and you want to avoid the barber pole altogether, then I would consider doing a chain ply yarn for your gradient yarn. And so in that case, use your 150 grams, 200 grams, however much fiber you want, and I would basically spin it as a 3-ply chain ply and just spin all of the purple together, and then spin all of the navy blue together, and then all of the olive, and then all of the sage green. And so you'll have one big bobbin with all of these colors spun sequentially, and then you can go through and then do your chain ply. And when you chain ply, then all the sage will kind of wrap up on the sage. It'll loop back on itself, and then the olive will loop back on itself, the navy will loop back, and then the purple will loop back, and then you'll get a continuous smooth color through all of those. So chain ply might be the way to go if you want to make that kind of smooth gradient yarn. So spinning a chain ply yarn is going to be probably the easiest way to make a gradient yarn. The only trouble that I have with chain ply yarns is that they tend to be a little bit more inconsistent in diameter. Could be because my spinning of the singles, maybe if I'm not spinning perfectly evenly and consistently, then when I go and I chain ply the yarn, I might have some thicker sections, some thinner sections, but that may or may not bother you. Now finally, the third step is, now if we know what kind of yarn we want to make, now we have to go about preparing the fiber for actually spinning. So looking at all of these bundles, if I were to break this up and spin this just as is, I would be getting a little bit of blue and then purple, and then blue and then purple, and then blue and then purple. So if you don't want those little blips of color to come out as you're spinning, then you'll want to blend this a little bit more. Maybe you are, pulling this through a drum carder, maybe you put it on a blending board, maybe you put it through some combs, maybe you use some hand cards and blend this together so that the blue in here gets better dispersed into the rest of this fiber. Same with these color sections. So if I'm looking at this, maybe I split this in half, and I actually take all of these and I spin those together, blend and card all of these together, and blend and card all of these together. So really that is the quick and easy way to look at your spinning fiber and make it into a gradient yarn. You want to look at the colors, see how you can break them apart. So step one would be breaking up your fiber into the different color chunks. The second step would be really considering what kind of yarn you want to make, and that will help determine how you divide up all of your color chunks, whether you're going to make a 2-ply yarn, 3-ply yarn, or a chain ply yarn. And then from there, you go about preparing your fiber by actually blending the colors together, making smooth transitions. So like you're making just purple roll eggs, and then purple blue roll eggs, and then blue green roll eggs, and so on and so forth. And then basically with all of your prepared fiber, you can go ahead and spin all your singles, ply them as you need to make your final yarn, and then ta-da, you will have your gradient yarn. I'm very, very excited to see what kind of yarns that you make with these techniques. Now, if you want to learn more about how to spin gradient yarns, or how to take a hand-painted braid of fiber and spin it in multiple different ways, we have a number of courses on the School of SweetGeorgia where we teach how to spin from scratch. If you've never touched a wheel before, never touched a spindle, we have a lot of spinning classes. And then we have a lot more classes on how to prepare fiber, how to mix and blend colors, how to get different effects. And at the end of the day, this is really about learning how to be very intentional with the kind of yarn that you make and use for your projects. There are lots of different ways of using your hand spun yarn. It doesn't have to be in a yoke of a sweater or anything like that. We have a number of classes as well showing you how you can use your hand spun yarn for other projects. So you can find all of those courses on the School of SweetGeorgia. And right now, for this autumn, we are actually hosting a bit of a make-along, spin-along in our Multicraftual Maker group on the Discord channel for Sweet Georgia. So you can find us on Discord. It is sweetgeorgiayarns.com/Discord. That will get you into our server, and then you can join us there and chat about making your own gradient spun yarns. And I'm looking forward to seeing everyone's yarn and then what you make out of it. Thank you so much for watching today. If you like this episode, please do hit subscribe. We come here every week and we talk about something to do with the fiber arts, whether it's spinning or weaving, knitting, crochet, dyeing, all of the above. We're here for that. So thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. All right, bye for now.